Me. So hello everyone. Please don't forget to write down where you're from, your name. So that's a nice opportunity to get your networking. And furthermore, you have the opportunity to share your LinkedIn. So you can accept new people around the world. So as said before, today I will cover the survival guide for the Java architecture in the cloud era. So again, it's gonna be 30 minutes of talk and more 30 minutes of live coding. The whole point here is to introduce you to several concepts in the approach and for sure several books because as Blake mentioned, I'm a guy who loves to read and write a lot about Java technology and so on. Let me introduce you briefly. My name is Otavio Santana. My Twitter handle is @OtavioJava. So if you have Twitter handle, if you have Twitter account, please follow me on Twitter. If you don't, please create your Twitter account. It'll be amazing. Right now, I'm working staff engineer at Xgeeks. So it's a Portuguese company. Don't worry, I'm gonna talk about later. Uh, because I love to do open source, even my free time, I do server specification, the Java community process. So if you hate Java 8 or higher, sorry, I try to do my best to help the community on that side. I also helped several Java specification, GSRs, and also right now I'm working Jakarta E specification. That's a new home from Java E. Because of that, I did several project contribution. For example, I become Apache committer, I become Eclipse committer. I am Eclipse project leader, where on my free time I usually like to write articles and posts and books about Java technology, and I received several awards. For example, Java Champion, Oracle Groundbreaker, Oracle Groundbreaker Award, and so on. So that's a little bit about me. And yes, if you want to do questions, I can see the chat right now. So let's do interaction way. And hopefully you put where you're from. Please introduce yourself and then share your LinkedIn where we can make the connection to stay close. But anyway, welcome everyone. Let's talk about cloud, right? Because right now everything become cloud application somehow. But why do we need cloud? Why do we work with cloud today? Basically, there's no relationship between cloud and agile about the history. However, if you take a look at the history, you can feel that because our agile, the solution of cloud makes even more sense. Why? Because in the past, we had a waterfall model where we need to deploy application like every year we had deploy a window every Friday night, and need to wait like 3 months to release application. And right now it's not enough, right? So we want to deploy faster and faster to give people feedbacks, to have more interaction with the product itself. Okay, so basically that's why we have agile, to look to that and do what you do best, that is delivery products, right? Because the most important state of the application is when the application is on production. That's why they decided to create the agile methodology. So they decided to decrease the complexity to deliver software. So Agile Manifesto was born because of that. That's why they had individual interaction over process and tool, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract or negotiation, respond to change over following the plan. Okay? The whole point here is delivery, delivery, and delivery. Why? Why do I doing that? The whole point here about Agile is to put closer, take the guy who know the business, the product owner, it takes this guy closer to development team. However, that's not enough, right? Because if you think about it, okay, I create my code, I have my code ready, but that is it's not enough because I need to negotiate with the operation guys. I need to handle because sometimes I need to upgrade the language, I need to update the JVM because the performance, because I will increase my productivity in the code. And the whole point about the agile and why agile was born was basically because this this goal here to break down the silos. So instead of wait months, I want to deliver application like days or perhaps a couple times in the same day. So to break down the silos again, we have right now the DevOps culture, right? The idea is to make closer the operation team with the developers as we did with Agile Manifesto when we put developers closer to the product owner itself. That's why we have the Biz DevOps where you take some business development in operation, and right now we have 1,000 of ops things. So we have security ops where you put security with operation, security dev ops. The whole point is break down the silos to make faster the application, to make faster to deliver the application. Okay? But I did not mention about cloud. What does cloud mean to us? Briefly, cloud is somebody else's problem. Is basically when I don't care about some point and or some details, and then I prefer to pay to somebody else to handle that to me, right? So I'm gonna share to you later because think in the past, I want to deliver a product in Japan. I need to hire some people from Japan or maybe hire some people from US, travel to Japan, rent a place, and then control the power energy, control the servers, and control the computer and so on. Right now, I don't need to do that, right? So I go to the cloud, pay to infrastructure, to the region Asia, for example, and he go. So basically, cloud is somebody else's problem. So if I'm computer, a software a house, I don't want to handle the details about infrastructure on my company. So I will pay to somebody else. The best analogy that I have right now is the restaurant. So my goal is to prepare the restaurant, and sometimes I don't need to handle with the calls. Uh, I don't need to handle the cheese. I just need to prepare my food. So I buy a cheese ready, I buy a milk ready, and so on. So I don't need to prepare everything. So I pay to somebody else solve this problem to me, and my goal is to deliver the food to my clients. For sure, there is a beautiful definition from NIST, National Institute of Standard and Technology, about that. But and then the whole point is somebody else's problems. So let's go to that. In cloud, yes, as you probably know, there's a couple of services, and you probably know this sample here about the relationship between cloud and pizza, both sell as service. And again, the whole point here is to the somebody else problem. For example, if I decide to do everything on my own home, like make it home or on premise, I need to prepare everything. I need to have the whole hardware. I need to have the whole bureaucracy. I need to handle power energy. I need to handle the place to put the server. I also need to have the knowledge to handle the security, this kind of details, right? So that's on traditional on premise. And guess what? We, we have one option to decrease that complexity and pay somebody else to handle the hardware. That's why we have the infrastructure as a service. So the best analogy that I have on my mind right now is when we go to uh, the, the the place to buy a pizza, a frozen pizza, buy a frozen pizza, go to at home, warm that pizza, and then eat. So will decrease a lot of complexity because you don't need to prepare everything by your home. So you just need to warm the pizza. The next step is besides the infrastructure, we we will pay also to operation knowledge. So that's a PaaS, so platform as a service. The best analogy that we have again is a pizza delivery where you call or use an app, and basically you decrease the complexity. You don't need to know to prepare the pizza, don't need to warm the pizza itself, and so on. So that's a pass. So think about platform message, think about Heroku, and so on. You have your source, you need to develop your source, you need to define what kind of service your application needs, and that is it. You don't need to handle the version of the EVM, don't need to handle the database that you're gonna use, and don't need to maintain this kind of database. Basically, you will say that okay, I want this database, I want that database, and do everything else to me, right? And the last one is when I don't care about anything. So beside the operation, I also want the knowledge to prepare the code itself. Okay, so it's a software as a service. Again, on premise, I need to do everything on my home. So I need to have the hardware, the operations, and the knowledge. Uh, Infrastructure as a service, I decrease the complexity don't, because I don't need to maintain the hardware anymore. I don't need to handle the operations and the knowledge. Move on to the right, the PaaS, platform as a service. I don't need to handle the hardware and the operation anymore. Just the knowledge to create the software itself, the code. And the last one, the SaaS, I don't need to handle anything else. As you can see here right now, we are facing the trade-off for sure. Because if you go to SaaS, I will have a huge abstraction of complexity. However, I probably will pay more for that, right? On my left hand here, I have on-premise where I probably will pay cheaper, probably the cheapest solution. However, I need to handle anything else by my home. So that's why I believe the best definition to me to cloud is somebody else's problem. So I will pay to avoid my headache. And right now, beside the three classic one, right now we have much more than those three. So besides infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and SaaS, we have a couple of derivations. For example, we have CaaS, that is container as a service. Why is it between PaaS and IaaS? Because it decreased the complexity of IaaS. However, it does not offer abstraction of to become a PaaS. So it is in the middle or between IaaS and PaaS. For example, if you decide to use Kubernetes, so it's much easier than decide to handle all the container by your home, your bare hand. However, it's a huge complexity if you compare to, for example, Heroku, okay? And when we talk about PaaS, right now we have a huge amount of service. So we have, for example, database as a service. So if you're familiar with NoSQL right now, you probably saw a lot of solution around NoSQL database, right? So MongoDB has your own solution to MongoDB as a service. Cassandra has your own solution. Uh, Neo4j has your own solution, so on. Beside the NoSQL, there is also the solution to SQL database itself. For example, Amazon has is I guess the name is RDB, exactly to provide solution to where you don't need to handle the management of database anymore. We also have the one more derivation that's serverless, right? So the whole point here is I have the source and I don't want to handle anything else. So back in the service, functional service, it's not a scope to define the difference between them, but the whole point is those are the derivation of platform as a service. And yes, we have much more. Managing event streaming, managing API gateway, managing integration, and so on. The whole point here is besides, furthermore, The three one that we used to have, you have more and more derivation from the three classical ones. Okay, and let's move on because right now we are living the cloud trends. So this one here uh, is a projection based on the source 5 years ago. Probably it will be faster because the pandemic situation. Probably as you can see, all the company become a remote somehow. So even the company is not a remote first, like the most modern one, they need to handle with remote situation. And the cloud solution increased a lot. So we have like serverless computing, quantum computing, digital native application, and so on. And probably you heard a lot about, come on, cloud native, because cloud native become a buzzwords where everybody needs to understand, needs to learn, and so on. So if you go to the history about cloud trainings, in the past we had cloud with the IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, and then a lot of people heard about it, but they decided to don't go, especially the huge companies, and then they decide to take application that's still on premise. However, if some reason they decide to move the application to cloud, the application is ready. So they decide to create the definition of cloud ready. Okay. Um, and then there are solutions that we need to think about the both solution, because sometimes we need to face application that must run on premise and also on cloud. So that's become a cloud friendly application. And now the cloud native, don't worry, I'm going to explain more about the cloud native definition, but that's just a chronological definition. Okay. And basically cloud native is because you design your application and this application was born to run in the cloud itself. So it's a cloud native application. I know there's a huge discussion about that. Don't worry, I'm gonna spend some time. But the whole point is, it's hard to understand between the technical definition of cloud native and the marketing definition about cloud native, because right now both work so tightly, and sometimes it's difficult even to me to define which one's the right one, it was not the right one. But the whole point is right now we have like 1,000 of cloud native definition. Let's go to a couple. This one here is from Pivotal. So cloud native is an approach to building and running application that exploit and take advantage of cloud computing model. There is this book here that I love. So architecting cloud native applications. So cloud native is a different way of thinking about software system. Basically, it's this book explains to you more about operation guide to decrease the complexity of cloud, to use more automation in the cloud with your application and so on. That is this book here, Cloud Native Development Pattern and Best Practice. It has the doers, so it's basically deploy, update, replace, and scale. The whole point here is to decrease the complexity of operation to use, for example, infrastructure as a code, and something like that, because to this book here, Cloud Native is about decrease the complexity of operation. Okay. This one here is Cloud Native Transformation, and he said something about the whole complete transformation around the software development that we have saw before. For example, in the past, we had waterfall. Right now, mostly of us are living in the agile methodology. And this book believes the future is now, and we are working with cloud native transformation, where everything is about the software is around the cloud. So I want to run CI/CD with cloud. I want to run application in the cloud. So probably just test the application as software developer remotely or locally, and everything else, the staging, the production, will be in the cloud. So it's a transformation because not the developer itself, they are management chains, they are clients change, and so on. So it's a huge transformation around the cloud to explore more and more and more the way that we are handled with cloud itself. Uh, that is this organization here, Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So it's a way to empower. If you are not familiar with CNCF, basically it's a huge organization that has several open source projects and frameworks to help in the cloud native. And as you can see here, nobody knows what does that mean yet. But the whole point here is we have a huge amount of company behind this foundation. And one important fact about this foundation is even the company that helps this product, the company has their own definition about cloud native. So there is a definition from CNTF. So it's create and empowering the organization with modern application. Uh, it has several samples here like container, service mesh, microservice, multiple infrastructure, declarative APIs are samples. I'm not big fan of this definition, this approach, because first, it has most buzzword than definition itself. I'm not familiar with it. And also, we need to think about the microservice. Is microservice the new silver bullet? I don't think so, right? So talking about DZone right now, in this year, in the last year, we saw a couple articles that say, okay, microservice is cool, but sometimes you should stay with monolith application. Okay, microservice has trade-offs as well, and that's why I'm not big fan of cloud native. So because yes, if you want to, if you think it's possible, you can use monolith with cloud native. Why not? As I mentioned before, there is a chronological definition, and there are several articles that cover that. And the whole point here is if you have an application that was born on cloud native and based on container, for example, congratulations. Based on this, you have a cloud native application. Let's move on. Based on a couple articles and books that I read, this one, this definition belongs to me, so feel free to use. However, this definition that I have so far, because as you can see, there are a couple companies investing a lot of money on cloud native, and probably I believe that we're gonna see a different way the cloud native today than we're gonna see that in 2 years. So we will still suffer with a constant change of the cloud application, the cloud architecture. Okay, so right now we defined the cloud. What does that mean to us? At least to me. Then we went through cloud native application, and unfortunately, I don't have the right answer about the definition because we have a couple of organizations that are working on that. However, we don't have a standard definition of cloud native yet. That's what I'd like to show to you the current situation about the name, the branding name. And let's face the challenge to work with cloud native application or cloud application itself. So uh, those are the for sure the first ones to handle with cloud application. So the routes, we need to define the DTP request, the cache, and so on. Security, right? There is an amazing research about security, especially to NoSQL database, where almost the whole Redis NoSQL database, for example, again the number was around 80%, has security issues basically because the database has a public IP. Besides that, it does not define the user and the password. So an IP, a public service, and you can go do whatever you want. So that's a huge issue of security, right? So uh, to the grant application to access the right applications. So security is something like is totally important to us. However, we usually ignore that. Uh, Define the security to make sure that the right application have access to the right database and so on. And yes, we need to make sure that the database is does not have a public IP, and if it does, it has at least a user and password. And yes, we need to think about upgrade the database in the language. Something easy to do, right? Yes, Samantha, it's not safe. And yes, upgraded the database and language. So we need to think about how we can update easily the database, the language, and so on. And yes, this one here is a kind of jerk because after we have Kubernetes, it seems like you don't need to handle with backups anymore because everybody who does presentation about Kubernetes does not mention about uh, backup anymore. So I'm not sure about that, but I think the backup of database is still relevant to us. And yes, we need to discuss about that because we need to find one easy way to do backups. If you need to stop the whole application to do this kind of thing, if you want to do a snapshot of the database itself. But the whole point here is we need to think about how we can handle with backups of the database itself. And yes, please, CI/CD, right? So I guess there is no doubt that continuous integration, continuous deployment are important to us because the right moment to us, the best moment to us as a developer is when the application is on production. Yes, the exception for sure is Friday because I kind of enjoy to enjoy my Friday. So the best moment to me is to deploy application every day and if possible, no Friday. And yes, every time that we talk about that, we need to think about the trade-off to handle this kind of situation, right? Because we have the option to do that by your own hand. So you can need to have the knowledge, the hardware, and everything, or you can pay to somebody else to do that to us. And we need to handle this formula because the complexity means risk, and every time that you pay to somebody else to decrease the complexity, or we probably will increase the cost, right? So that's a trade-off situation here. So should I pay to this, but I need to, how about long term and so on? So need to handle. I mean, sometimes it's much better to pay somebody else because I don't have anybody in my team to do that. I don't need to hire somebody else because you know, find some people with a good qualification is hard. And right now we are the whole world is remote. With that, it's still hard to find people with a good qualification. So we need to handle this trade-off between cloud solution and cloud service and management of knowledge. But anyway, let's go to tips, right? So one good tip is if you have application that is in cloud, or we have application that you want to move this application to the cloud. So take a look at this book here. So the 90 things every cloud engineer should know. Basically, those are as the title says. So 97 tips. So it's articles or chapters. Uh, those are important to us. So please use management service if possible. Why every engineer should be a cloud engineer these days? So keep it simple. So as much as possible. Source code management for software delivery. Container are magic. So there's a huge discussion if should I use container to use my database, and usually they said no. Okay, there's a huge discussion behind that, but I don't want to go deep on that situation. But right now, as I know, if you have to handle database, you should avoid to use containers. Okay. And the last one, probably if you love buzzwords, won't be happy to that, but it's okay if you are not running Kubernetes. I know that's a huge buzzword around the world, but sometimes uh, you have the option to don't. Uh, you don't need to use Kubernetes if you don't need to use Kubernetes. Okay, so don't feel shame because your situation, your specification is not ready to use Kubernetes. Okay. Uh, Besides this book here, I really recommend to read this book here about infrastructure as a code. Okay, so to me, it's art of the cloud. So where you can use your code, your infrastructure as a code. So instead of have several scripts, you have one place with the CloudNative API to say what your application needs to run, stuff like that. So to me, infrastructure as a code is start of the art to run the application in the cloud. So it's more aligned with the culture of DevOps. It's more faster because you know exactly what your application needs, and you're gonna see the inconsistency because basically, okay, what does my application need? So here you go. Here's the YAML file. Here's the script that need to run my application. And yes, GitOps. If you think about microservice, you probably know about the pyramid of microservice, the hey to us, right? Where we have the first level where we need to use ATP resource and then use the ATP verb and then use a specific resource and then use links, right? So the haven of microservice. The best analogy that I have on my mind to cloud is okay, you need to have everything automat using automation as possible, and then run your application uh, with infrastructure as a code. And the last start of art is please use GitHubs. GitHub is basically you take your application really, really close with the operation itself. Because you have your code, you have the script or YAML file with the definition what your application needs to run, how many cluster does the application need. So it's basically based on the declarative APIs. Okay. So those are the definition of GitHub. So Git a single source of truth. So everything about both source and operation are the Git repository. Uh, a single place to operate. So if you want to upgrade your version like Java 8, 11, 17, so you need to update uh, this Git repository and so on. And yes, all changes are observable and verifiable. For example, if you want to test to upgrade your license, your JVM version or your database version, you can create a PR. And then yes, you have the option to run the CI/CD because it's become mandatory. You can run the CI, check if everything's okay. If everything's okay, you can merge this chain to the master or main branch. And as some the code was merged to production branch, the application will build and run the whole build process to deploy the application. So basically, what you do have on your production branch is what you have on production. So that's important to us, right? So think about infrastructure as a code in GitHubs because to us, a developer, that is amazing. I mean, it will be easier to us to understand each version do I need to run my application because it is on infrastructure as a code that is close to my Git. Okay, that's a start of the state of the art. So go to this way. Okay, let's talk about a little bit about the best practice of cloud native. As I mentioned before, cloud native, we don't have a right definition yet. However, we still have old things that still make sense to us. The Java Factor application is simple. For example, it's not there's nothing new here, so it's based on this book from by Martin Fowler, the partners of the project application architecture, where we have 12 commandments or how your application should behave. For example, please, code base, instead of send the source by email, you use a repository, Git, SVN, Mercurial, so on. Depends outside the repository, please. So do that. Configuration, please. It does not make sense to take your user password inside the code itself. So please put this kind of thing outside the code. And those are the 12 application good practice to use and run your application in the cloud. Again, those books are old but code. So clean code, clean architecture, DDD, and effective Java. The three first ones are if you're a developer in general, and if you're a Java developer, yeah, you need to read a little bit more and take this effective Java as a book. This is a good one to at least start to work in the cloud. And again, those books are old but good. So if you're familiar with microservice and we did not read about DDD, probably when you read about DDD, it will make more sense to you. So read about DDD. And yes, every time right now we mention microservice with Cloud Native because it's kind of become mandatory to use both. However, microservice is not a silver bullet. Okay, you need to think about that. There are a couple books that say that. So migrating microservice to monolith to microservice by Sanil himself. In first chapter, he said, okay, uh, if it don't make sense to use microservice, that's simple. Does not use microservice. This book here by Etanaga, a friend of mine, and he said, okay, just because Netflix and Amazon decide to use microservice, it doesn't make sense that you should use as well. Okay. Also, usually microservice is more about scalability of the team itself than the application. That's there is a huge discussion about that in the Commons law. So if you want to know more about the organization of your company and so on, uh, I'm gonna share the slides so where you can take these books and reference to go deep on that. Quickly about the Java and what you have right now in the whole situation. To work with Java and Cloud Native, we right now are working several optimizations. For example, there are a couple of optimizations in the garbage collectors, improvements on especially containers. Again, containers. I'm not talking specifically about Docker. Docker is just one implementation of container. If you want to know about standards in container, go to OCE, Open Container Initiative, and know more about it. So there's much more containers than Docker. Okay, I release every 6 months. I know it might be hard to us to keep our application with the latest version as possible. However, we still have the LTS version that basically works as Ubuntu, and there are several optimization to work with startup time. So, for example, the JAP 3.1 that is to share that data class data sharing. And every time there is discussion about Java and cloud, you complain about, okay, my application takes so long to start. And basically that's because the reflection. So if you have no idea about reflection, basically, uh, uh, oh, thank you, Hayata. If you're familiar with reflection, if you have no idea about reflection, don't worry. Basically, if you are a Java developer and use annotations, the whole point here is it takes a cost. So if you use reflection, the framework itself will read the whole information on the runtime. So it will take a little bit longer to start up your application. To decrease this kind of startup time, there is frameworks who, instead of use reflection, read the whole metadata uh, on the build time. Okay, for example, instead of reflection, you can use Java Annotation Processor. But again, as a cloud native decision, we need to think also about the Java framework decision. So if you use a framework that you use reflections, you will get some advantage. If you use framework that you're gonna use Java annotation process or any kind of framework that we will use and we read your annotation on the build time, we will get some advantage as well. So you need to handle that and think about trade-off. Okay. And yes, in the Java world we have like a huge amount of frameworks. So take one and be happy with that. For example, Quarkus, this one use a build time framework. So instead of use reflection, it will use build time to read the annotation, the metadata. It's exactly what Micronaut does as well with Java Annotation Processor. So it will be faster to start up and it will consume less memory to start the application itself. But if you have the option to use reflection as well, for example, Helidon has the both options. We have Spring, we have Payara, Tomcat, and so on. So there are a huge amount of Java frameworks to do that. Okay. And yes, every time that we talk about Java and cloud, we usually talk about serverless, right? So why serverless does not work very well in the Java world? Basically because Java is created to run my application and optimize every time. That's why we have garbage collector to manage the memory that the application needs to run. That's why we have Git, just-in-time compilation, to run fast on my application every time that's run. However, if I just need to run my application once, I don't need to have a garbage collector. I don't need to have Git just-in-time compiler, right? So on that situation, you have an option to take application and run as native with, for example, GraalVM. Okay, you can convert your application with GraalVM. There are several frameworks that have support to do that. For example, Micronaut, Quarkus, and Helidon, and Spring is working on that right now. But think about it. If it is to run once and then gone, it makes sense to use serverless. However, if you want to run an application a couple of times, think about garbage collector and just in time. There are several benchmarks, especially from Red Hat, that compare one application that run a native way with Mandrel and GraalVM, and one application with the JVM. The startup with the native is faster, it saves more memory. However, with a long time, the JVM become more optimized to run the application. Therefore, faster and even more economic. The best analogy that I have on my mind is avoid to compare motorbike with plane, right? Okay, in the first mile for sure, the motorbike will be faster than the plane. But think about cross the ocean. In that situation, if you want to cross the ocean, the plane will be faster than the motorbike. Okay, you need to think about. So right now, the best sample that I've seen to use native Java application. So instead of UJVM, convert to system operation application itself, issue serverless. Anything else, we don't have enough benchmark to prove that it will run faster outside the JVM than inside the JVM. So too long time, think about run the application in the JVM. Okay, unfortunately, I don't have enough time, so, but don't worry. I have my application here. I have two samples. One that need to create my application from scratch, but unfortunately, I don't have time, so I took this sample here. As you can see here, I have a simple application that's ready. Don't worry, I'm gonna show to you the GitHub. The whole point here is I have my application. It's such a Jakarta application. Let's show to you .xml. It's a simple Maven product, as you can see here. As you can see here, I have my configuration, my dependencies. It's a simple Jakarta EE application that has connection with NoSQL database. Okay. My configuration of using password is outside the code. Hey, Otavio, but you're connecting localhost. Yes, because it's going to run locally. However, you can override the whole configuration by micro profile. So on theory, I don't even to know about the credential that I'm going to need to use or need to run on production, because you can override this configuration by system environments. Okay. As the database itself and so on. The whole point here is my application does not need to know. So I have my host here, my configuration. And as you can see here, if you're familiar with microprofile, I'm injecting my document collage manager based on that configuration. Again, I can and I should override this configuration to run a production, because it's the first, it will make sense to run my application in the same host that I'm running the the database itself, right? But anyway, that's my configuration. If you remember about what I said about um, the step to create a good application, I said to use infrastructure as a code, right? And then, if possible, also use GitHubs, where you have your code and operation in one single place, and you can think about infrastructure as a code as GitHub as an evolution of infrastructure as a code. So as you can see here, the whole configuration is in one single place. So the host definition is here. So as you can see, my app here, my HTTP, and the whole configuration. The service that my application needs is here, as you can see, right? So my application needs MongoDB version 3.6. And as you can see here, those YAML files define my application itself. So I'm using Java 8, but if I want to, I can use Java 11. And yeah, as you can see here, those are declarative APIs. So I'm saying what I want to run, and they will build to me. So this command here is to build my application. The relationship here, so I need to say, okay, this application needs to have access to this service here, MongoDB, with the name MongoDB. So I have the MongoDB name here, and then I did a relationship. Uh, it's not to grant access between application service, but if you think about microservice area, you need also to grant uh, access between applications, right? So my financial application need to have access to my people resource and so on. And you need to make sure that my marketing database application is not able to see my financial database, for example. Okay, so I need to think about security. And as you can see here, everything are declarative. It's not beauty, as you can see here, but I'm overwriting the whole configuration. As you can see here, okay, let's go. I'm running the Java jar, okay? And then I'm overwriting the host of my application. I'm overwriting the database itself. I'm overwriting the user. So as you can see here, locally, I don't want to configure the user and the database itself, the password, the use, stuff like that. But on production, I need to override this configuration, as you can see here. And as you can see here, this belongs to my system environment. So I don't even need to know about this as a developer, right? And as you can see, the whole configuration is on one single place because I'm using GitHub's I single font of truth, okay? This example here I use in platform message. However, you have similar approach with Heroku and so on. The whole point here is, okay, if your company has operation, that's fine. You can use something similar to that. But if you don't be ashamed to use platform as a service to decrease the complexity and focus more in the application itself. Okay. My time is almost over, but before I finish, sorry. Uh, my whole point here is to introduce you the approach of how can we survive in the cloud. I explained to you what does cloud mean, the definition that's not ready yet about cloud native, uh, a couple of challenge when you decide to go to the cloud, the state of your application in the cloud, where okay, you need to leave the on-premise, move everything to the cloud, and then if possible, use declarative APIs to define the operation that you need, and then finally took the code and of the application, the operation in one single point using GitHub's culture. And I showed to you a demo that we're gonna show the repository later, where you can run, test it. Uh, right now, I'm working at Xgeeks company, so the whole point here is a Portuguese company where we right now are writing several articles about technology and software development. Uh, we right now are focused more in high coding standards, flexible work style. We are integrated with KI Group, so it's a huge group in Europe, and we are the whole goal here is to be continuous innovation. Okay, so a little bit about us. Basically, Kia Group is a huge group focused in innovation and startups. And you can think about a huge platform to startups. So we have a couple solutions to any kind of startup. So think about mobility, financial, investment, performance. Xgeek is just a small piece of this platform of startups and companies. And that is it. So if you have any question, please let me know. Hopefully you will enjoy. And don't worry, I will share the whole links to you soon. And again, thank you, DZone. Thank you, Blake, to have me here.
Awesome. So we've got Otavio here for a few more minutes. So if you have a question, put that into chat, or you can also unmute, come onto video, let us know your questions. I know we should have a few questions here, but don't be shy. Put those in the chat or unmute. We'd love to hear them. We also have a post-event survey, so be sure to fill out the survey. Let us know how we did today. It was just an excellent presentation. I know Hayata loved that he's working on a ref card, and Samantha's got some stuff out of it. We'll have to see what Guillaume thought of it as well. But any questions for Otavio while we have him here? Now, see, we've got Lior on as well. It's got to be like, I don't know if he's still out of Singapore, but it's got to be late for him. So we just got great feedback, man. That was a mic drop of a presentation. That was excellent. So it doesn't look like we'll get a lot of questions in today, but you know where to find Otavio. We put those links in the chat. We also will be posting this on DZone YouTube, so you'll be able to get the video as well. We'll send out the link to all the presentation slides. But this just an excellent presentation, Otavio. Thanks so much for taking the time out today to walk us through this. I think hopefully we'll all be able to survive now and also learn a little bit about Xgeeks as well. So that was really cool. So be sure to follow Otavio over on DZone or connect with him on LinkedIn and fill out that feedback form. We'll have that video up. We'll send out the links to that and the presentation. So if there's no other questions today, we will wrap it up and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoy and see you around.